The janitor once found Elaine Carter crying in the control room, not sobbing, just leaking quiet tears while recalibrating a voltage array. She wiped her face with an old microfiber cloth and muttered, "It's just the dust." The HVAC had been off all week. Then she went right back to fixing what someone else had broken. That was 6 years ago. She didn't cry again. Not when her last 3 supervisors were escorted out for financial misalignment. Not when her maintenance team was slashed from 12 people down to 5. Not even when the new ERP update deleted 4 months of compliance logs, and she rebuilt the entire data chain from memory with 1 bourbon and 2 cans of Diet Coke. Elaine Carter was the kind of woman you didn't notice until something was on fire. Then she'd quietly walk in holding the extinguisher. Mid-50s, hair the color of steel shavings, face carved by fluorescent lighting and late shifts. She wore the same gray cardigan so often it looked like part of her ID badge. She didn't say much during meetings because she didn't need to. When the suits left to pat each other on the back over synergy slides, she was the one left holding the launch schedules, the legal sign-offs, and the passwords no one remembered. If the company had bones, Elaine was the marrow. She'd survived 4 restructures, 2 mergers, and 1 internal embezzlement scandal everyone pretended never happened. Through it all, she sipped her lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug that read, "World's Okayest Engineer," watching the chaos swirl around her like weather she had already predicted. The new $100 million flagship plant, a solar fusion hybrid site in Nevada they called Project Helios, was supposed to be her crown jewel. It was her blueprint, her wiring map, her compliance filings, her whispered favor calls to utility inspectors that bent grid schedules around supply delays. Her spreadsheets had tabs that made grown men cry. The wiring schematics were color-coded like a kindergarten art show, but no one gave her a ribbon. They gave her more work. Elaine didn't complain. She double-knotted her boots, clipped her safety badge, and hit the floor, marking off delivery corrections and reminding interns not to pile HVAC manuals on top of the emergency shutoff valve. 2 weeks before launch, she was still clocking 18-hour days, juggling vendors, unions, and some procurement fool who ordered 50,000 serrated pipes instead of 5,000. She was the firewall between almost ready and what just exploded. Then came the new hire, Bryce Whitfield, freshly anointed COO, walking shadow of expensive arrogance. He arrived in a tailored blue suit that cost more than Elaine's first car, carrying a tablet like it was a crown. Word spread fast. He was a streamliner, a fixer, a man who made his name gutting legacy systems and replacing institutional inertia with agile execution. Which, translated from executive dialect, meant he was about to fire everyone who actually knew how things worked. Elaine watched him stroll across the production floor like he owned oxygen, holding impromptu meetings without inviting the people who ran the plant. He called interns rock stars and Elaine ma'am as if she were some front desk relic. Within days, he started using words like dead weight and legacy operations. Elaine wasn't offended, she was intrigued, because the thing about her, she always made copies. Digital ones, paper ones, even a few tucked into a dusty fireproof safe under her desk. So when Bryce began sniffing around the compliance database asking who handled the utility integration, Elaine didn't say a word. She just updated her spreadsheet, tweaked a few permissions, and went home that night with a quiet smile. The kind you wear when you see the train coming and you've already stepped off the track. Bryce thought the job was the launch, the cameras, the TED Talk moment. Elaine knew the job was the grid, the wires, the signature that let the entire system breathe. And what he didn't know, because he never cared to ask, was that there was only one name authorized on that document. Hers. Bryce Whitfield showed up like bad cologne, loud, overconfident, and impossible to wash off. Day 1, he parked in the executive visitor spot and strutted through the lobby with a Bluetooth headset he never actually used. "Let's get this place humming again," he said to the receptionist, like he was entering a spa instead of a 500,000 square foot industrial complex powered by turbines and heat exchangers. Elaine had kept those systems alive through 3 budget cuts and a nationwide copper shortage. Bryce came from consulting, which was corporate slang for he's never built a damn thing. He could build PowerPoints, though. Endless, animated, self-congratulatory PowerPoints. Within 48 hours, he was slicing up org charts like a kid with new scissors. 3 department heads were gone by Thursday, replaced with strategic advisors who looked like they'd been hired from a deodorant commercial. Nobody over 40 got a meeting invite that week. Elaine was told her calendar access was temporarily limited during a workflow reshuffle. She didn't argue. She had her own system anyway, an old ThinkPad nobody dared touch, binders labeled plant launch, no idiots edition, and a locked drawer filled with blue ink originals of every energy authorization ever filed. Bryce never once asked what she actually did. Instead, he wandered through briefings with a whiteboard marker, talking about modernizing culture and eliminating single points of failure. Ironic, considering he was rapidly becoming the biggest single point of failure in the company's history. At one all-hands meeting, Elaine sat in the back as usual, scribbling notes in pen while Bryce strutted before a screen plastered with buzzwords. He pointed to a pie chart titled Legacy Inefficiencies and said, "This slice represents everything holding us back." Then he gestured toward Elaine. "Like our old compliance workflows. Why are we still using physical signatures in 5? Silence. Someone coughed. Elaine blinked once and kept writing. There was no reason to explain to a man who thought energy compliance was just a DocuSign checkbox. Bryce didn't want accuracy. He wanted a story. A hero narrative where he disrupted old systems and streamlined the dinosaurs. And for that, he needed a villain. Elaine was perfect. He started small, removing her from key calls, blocking her badge from restricted zones. Then she was pulled off the final launch committee to reduce redundancy. When she showed up to a safety inspection, clipboard in hand, Bryce greeted her with a grin that could have been printed on plastic. "We're going in a new direction, Elaine. Time for some fresh eyes." She didn't reply, just stared for a moment, as if memorizing his expression, then quietly left. That night, she printed out her full list of responsibilities, folded it neatly, and slid it into her safe next to a new USB drive labeled Final, Do Not Touch, because she could smell the storm coming. Bryce thought he was tightening a ship. What he was really doing was drilling holes in the hull while bragging about innovation. Whispers spread among the younger staff. What does Elaine even do? Isn't she like the plant historian? Bryce encouraged it, calling her our institutional memory like it was an insult. In one meeting, someone suggested automating the compliance chain. Bryce clapped. "Exactly. No offense, Elaine, but the future doesn't live in a binder." Elaine turned a page and calmly scribbled a note. "Remove his name from everything that matters." It was petty, yes, but after 27 years of being the adult in the room, even adults get tired of babysitting fools. Because Bryce hadn't just underestimated her. He didn't understand what she held. The master access files, the regulatory licenses, the single signature that allowed Project Helios to draw live current from the state grid. And when Bryce started talking about synergy in meetings that involved wiring schematics, Elaine knew the end was near. He'd never touched a breaker box in his life, yet he lectured electricians about streamlining grid integration. When she tried to explain that grid activation required hard copy authorization from the designated compliance officer, he smirked mid-sentence. "Elaine, please, it's not 1998, sweetheart." The word sweetheart hit the air like a power surge. Even the logistics guy who never noticed anything stopped chewing his gum. Elaine capped her pen, closed her binder, and stood. She didn't look at Bryce, she looked through him. Bryce gave a half shrug, as if dismissing her from existence. "HR will handle the exit process," he said, smiling like a man who thought he'd just solved leadership. Elaine didn't answer. She turned, calm as a frozen lake, and walked out. No scene, no tears, just quiet footsteps echoing across the polished floor of the operations wing. When security met her at her cubicle, The guard looked nervous. "We'll need your badge and fob," he said softly, holding out a clipboard. Elaine handed both over without a word. She reached for her coffee mug, the chipped one that said, "Still plays with power tools," and placed it in the cardboard box they'd given her. Alongside it, she put her stapler, a backup charger, 2 USB drives, and a laminated card labeled Utility Contact Protocol. "Carter, access only." The guard's eyes flicked toward the card, curious. She smiled faintly, then tucked it under her mug. She didn't cry. She didn't slam drawers or give a last speech. She just walked to the IT desk and asked for one final login. "Need to send my transition notes," she said. The tech, a kid half her age, nodded and tapped his badge. Elaine sat down, typed for 11 minutes, and sent one email to Bryce, legal, and 2 contacts no one else in the building even knew existed. The subject line: Final System Transfer Summary. Plant 6 pre-launch. The email was a masterpiece. Clear, complete, surgical. Every checklist, every compliance link, every encrypted path for the launch scripts meticulously documented. Except for one field. The primary utility compliance contact. Blank. No name, no explanation, no comment. Just a silent hole big enough to swallow an empire. Elaine logged out, closed the laptop, and left the box with security. "Facilities will need to verify my offboarding inventory," she said. Although that might be tricky, since I was facilities. She left without looking back. Launch day arrived like a parade. The Helios facility gleamed under desert sunlight, a sprawling monument of steel, glass, and corporate ego. The CEO wore a shiny graphite suit that made him look like a golf club come to life. Bryce strutted beside him, no tie, too much cologne, smiling for cameras. There was a drone operator filming overhead. A catering crew handed out pastries stamped with the company logo. Someone had even hired a local news channel to stream the ribbon cutting live. Hashtags were pre-written. Hashtag Future of Energy and hashtag Bright Tomorrow. All they needed was the switch to flip. When the CEO pressed the button, nothing happened. No lights, no hum of turbines, not even a flicker on the main display. At first, Bryce laughed. "Must be a software lag. Just reboot the terminal," he told an engineer. She tried twice, then called over an electrician. The man checked a few diagnostics, frowned, and muttered, "This isn't software. We're not hooked." Bryce's grin faltered. "What do you mean, not hooked? The plant's wired top to bottom." The electrician shrugged. "We've got hardware. We don't have clearance." A manager sprinted in, pale as chalk, waving his phone. "The utility just emailed. Activation requires a sign-off from the primary compliance officer. They're saying the listed contact is Elaine Carter. No alternate on record." Silence swallowed the stage. Even the drone stopped buzzing. The CEO turned slowly toward Bryce. "Is that correct?" Bryce's mouth twitched. "That can't be right. She was legacy ops." "Dead weight. Legacy what?" The CEO repeated, voice flat as stone. Bryce stammered. Cameras were still rolling. Investors were checking watches. One intern whispered, "Should we delay the ribbon cutting until the power's on?" "They never cut that ribbon." The catering crew wheeled their trays back to the van. The drone guy packed up his gear. The news team left to cover a local dog rescue instead. And Bryce stood in front of a dead building, drenched in sunlight and sweat, pretending it was all just a minor technical glitch. But everyone there knew. The plant hadn't failed. Bryce had. 2 hours later, the emergency board meeting began. No one had time to polish excuses or shoes. The CEO stormed in, wearing a golf pullover and the expression of a man who'd just lost $10 million before lunch. Half the VPs arrived mid-chew, bagels in hand, faces pale and anxious. Bryce came in last, sweating, colorless, clutching a tablet like it was a shield. The lights in the conference room flickered weakly, as if the building itself wanted to mock him. The representative from the regional utility company was already there. He didn't shake hands, didn't smile. A man in a gray suit, white hair, no expression. Looked like he'd been printed directly from a regulation manual. He opened a folder on the glass table and began reading in a tone that sounded like a eulogy. "We've reviewed the activation failure," he said. "The grid integration did not proceed due to lack of primary authorization." He turned a page. "Under state and federal protocol, activation of a high-capacity energy facility requires the authorization of the listed compliance officer of record." He looked up. "Your record shows one name, Elaine Carter." Silence, heavy enough to warp the air. The CEO leaned forward. "You're saying we can't power the plant until she signs?" "That is correct," said the man. Bryce cleared his throat. "But she's no longer with us. Her role was eliminated. We assumed the system would—" The lawyer interrupted without blinking. "No one updated the designation. Without a signed revocation and reassignment, the authorization remains locked. It cannot be automated. It must be manual." The CEO turned his gaze, slow, cold, like a glacier shifting. "Did anyone see a revocation form?" Legal flipped frantically through a binder. "We don't appear to have one on file." Bryce straightened his tie, voice rising. "She was redundant. We trimmed headcount. This is absurd." The CEO didn't respond. "How long if we contact her?" he asked the utility rep. "If she signs tonight, less than 24 hours. And if she refuses?" The man finally looked up from his papers, eyes like polished steel. "Then you must restart the designation process. Inspection, credential verification, full compliance review. 6 to 8 weeks minimum." A collective groan rippled across the table. 6 to 8 weeks meant missed contracts, canceled press coverage, and investor penalties by the day. The CEO exhaled through his nose, the sound of pure fury. Someone at the far end whispered, "Did no one check the compliance chain?" Legal cleared her throat. "We assumed operations would update it during transition." Bryce muttered. "We were optimizing workflows." The CEO's glare cut across the room. "Get me her number." Bryce tried to push back. "Sir, with respect, this is insane. We're being held hostage by a single form." The utility lawyer shut his folder with a soft snap. "You're not being held hostage, Mr. Whitfield. The system is simply functioning as designed to prevent exactly this kind of negligence." Then he stood, nodded once, and left. No drama. Just the sound of the door closing like a verdict. No one spoke. The CEO sat, fingers steepled, eyes fixed on Bryce. "You called her dead weight?" Bryce didn't answer. "Get out of my sight," the CEO said finally, "and pray she picks up the phone." That phone did ring, but not in an office. Elaine was in her kitchen, hands dusted with flour, wrist deep in sourdough. The radio hummed faint classical music. Outside, her neighbor's dog barked at absolutely nothing. It was the first full day off she'd had in decades. Baking was her peace. The phone buzzed across the counter, unknown number flashing. She wiped her hands, answered calmly. "Elaine Carter." "Elaine, this is Daniel from the board," came the voice, low, careful. "Ah," she said. "So not a charity call." He hesitated. "We'd like to discuss your immediate return under revised terms." Elaine turned the stove dial lower and leaned against the counter, watching her dough rise. "I see." "It's not a favor," Daniel continued quickly. "It's a formal request. The board recognizes your indispensability." "Essential," she corrected gently, a hint of a smirk ghosting her lips. "Yes," he admitted. "I'll send my terms tonight," Elaine said. "Non-negotiable. Have legal ready." Then she hung up, washed her hands, and went back to her bread. Elaine didn't pour her victory into champagne or speeches. She poured it into precision. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, the same focus in her eyes she once used to trace power relays and safety protocols. She typed her demands slowly, deliberately, like drafting a new compliance order. No emotion, no ego. Just cold logic and bullet points that would make an attorney's pulse quicken. When she finished, she saved the file as return terms final.pdf, attached it to an email titled simply, Your Move. Then she hit send, poured herself a glass of red wine, and leaned back as her bread finished rising in the oven. The PDF detonated like a silent bomb in the inboxes of every executive still pretending the launch delay was temporary. It was 1 page long. No legalese, no fluff, just 3 brutal lines. 1. Immediate reinstatement of authority over all plant compliance systems and utility correspondence. Full autonomy, not under operations or any restructuring team. 2. A formal public apology from Bryce Whitfield, read aloud in the same conference room where he had dismissed her, witnessed by the same staff. 3. A 400% raise, retroactive to her termination date. No performance tiers, no bonuses, pure salary. That was it. 3 items. Simple, devastating, precise. The CEO read it twice, exhaled through his nose like a man confronting divine punishment. HR stammered, "Can we even justify a 400% raise?" The CEO didn't look up. "You want the lights on? Pay the power bill." Legal frowned. "Whitfield will never agree to read the apology. Then he can explain it to our investors," the CEO said coldly, "or the press, or anyone else wondering why a $100 million facility is sitting dark in the Nevada desert." Bryce was summoned. He arrived late, as usual, wearing what could only be described as a crisis suit, navy wool, pressed within an inch of its life, and a face toggling between outrage and panic. The executives watched him walk in like witnesses to a car crash they couldn't stop. The CEO handed him a printout of Elaine's email. Bryce skimmed it, snorted, then laughed. A short, sharp bark of disbelief. "You can't be serious," he said. "A public apology? A raise? She's holding the company hostage." The CEO didn't blink. "She's not holding us hostage, Bryce. You gave her the keys, fired her, and then locked yourself outside. She's being vindictive," he snapped. Legal shut a binder with a sharp thud. "She's being compliant. That's the difference. Something you've never understood." Bryce looked around, searching for someone, anyone, to back him. No one moved. The air was too heavy. His charm had expired. "I'm not doing it," he said finally, crossing his arms. The CEO didn't argue. He opened his laptop, tapped a few keys, and said quietly, "Okay." Bryce blinked. "What does that mean?" "Draft resignation letter. Effective immediately," the CEO said, voice calm as a scalpel. Bryce's jaw dropped. "You're firing me?" "Not if you apologize," came the reply. He froze, color draining from his face. "This is insane." "What's insane?" the CEO said, leaning back, "is trusting you to lead anything after this disaster." Silence. The kind that made everyone in the room hold their breath. Bryce swallowed hard. "When's the meeting?" he asked finally, voice small. "Tomorrow morning," the CEO said. By sundown, Elaine's reply hit their inbox. "Terms acknowledged. See you at the reading." No exclamation mark. No warmth. Just finality. The next day, the main conference room was packed. Not a chair empty. HR, operations, compliance, even facilities, all there. The last time the room was this full, someone had spiked the Christmas punch, and the janitor tried to karaoke Bon Jovi into a mop. Now, it was silent. Everyone knew what was coming. Bryce stood at the front, suit flawless, eyes hollow. In his trembling hands was a single printed page. The CEO sat nearby, arms folded. The legal team waited in the back, clipboards in hand. Bryce cleared his throat. Twice. "Thank you all for being here," he began, voice thin, shaky. "I have a prepared statement on behalf of leadership." Bryce's voice wavered, every word landing like a confession dragged through gravel. "On behalf of the executive team," he read, "I acknowledge that the termination of Elaine Carter was a mistake. Her role in the development, compliance, and operational readiness of the Helios plant was not only significant, it was foundational. The word foundational hit the room like a slow clap no one dared start. Bryce swallowed hard. "We regret the oversight and recognize that her removal caused direct and avoidable delays to the project. Effective immediately, Elaine Carter is reinstated with expanded authority over all compliance systems and utility relations." His hands trembled as he read the final paragraph. "I also extend a personal apology to Ms. Carter. My previous remarks referring to her as legacy ballast were unprofessional, disrespectful, and entirely false. Ms. Carter is, and always has been, essential." His voice cracked on the last word. The room stayed silent for a heartbeat. Then, slowly, people began to look toward the door. Elaine walked in, the same gray cardigan over her button-down, practical boots clicking softly on the tile. No makeup, no performance, no pretense, just quiet gravity. She carried her clipboard like it was a weapon of truth. When she reached the front, Bryce held out her badge with both hands as if presenting a sacred artifact. Elaine accepted it without a word. Then she turned to face the crowd. The applause began. Not loud, but steady, growing like a rising hum. It wasn't the kind of applause people gave out of pity. It was the sound of collective recognition, of workers who had watched her hold the entire system together for years without fanfare. She didn't smile, didn't bow, didn't even linger. She simply nodded once and said, "Let's turn the damn thing on." And just like that, she walked out. The control room felt like a cathedral of machines waiting for their priest. Rows of polished monitors blinked in idle blue, turbines still, cables coiled like sleeping snakes. Engineers stood back, waiting. AT staff froze mid-keystroke. Even the janitor had wandered in, mop in hand, leaning against the wall like he didn't want to miss what came next. At the center console stood Elaine. No ribbon, no speech, no champagne. Just her and the hum of silence. She pulled a small brass fob from the chain around her neck, the last physical authorization key in an industry suffocating under digital proxies. She slotted it into the console, turned it once, and began typing commands. 4 lines, each precise, each irrevocable. Grid status, initializing. Grid status, syncing grid status, authorization verified. Then came the sound, a deep mechanical purr that rolled through the building's bones. Lights flared to life in a synchronized blaze. The overheads roared awake. Air vents hissed and exhaled as pressure equalized across all 3 wings. Turbines spun, humming in harmony. The control panels glowed green, schematic readouts blooming like an orchestra hitting its first chord. Outside, the plant came alive, the hum of current, the shimmer of power lines stretching toward the horizon, the faint vibration that meant the grid was breathing again. On screen, one final line blinked. Grid status, live. The applause didn't start right away. It didn't need to. The hum of energy spoke louder than clapping hands. Elaine stepped back, folded her arms, and let the room feel what competence sounded like. At the back, the CEO clapped once. Then again, slow, deliberate. Others joined in. Some smiled, some just exhaled. Relief washed through the team like cool air after a storm. For a moment, everyone forgot the weeks of chaos and humiliation. All they saw was the woman who had walked through fire and flipped the world back on. Bryce, standing off to the side, forced a smile. He took a hesitant step toward her. "Elaine," he began, voice thin, searching for dignity he no longer owned. "I just want to say—" Elaine turned toward him, calm and sharp as a blade. "Essential," she said softly. "It means leverage. You understand that now?" He opened his mouth to answer, but she was already walking away, badge on her belt, clipboard under her arm, the hum of a living plant behind her, like a chorus of machines singing her name. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Everyone else would. By the next morning, the headlines had already spread across LinkedIn and local business journals. Helios plant powers on after record delay. Compliance veteran returns to lead restart. The PR team didn't even try to hide the truth. They couldn't. Investors were demanding answers, employees were leaking photos of Elaine at the console, and energy blogs were calling her the woman who rebooted Nevada. For once, the internet got it right. Bryce Whitfield, however, did not appear in any of those articles. His name had been scrubbed from internal communications by Sunrise. HR filed his voluntary resignation memo under Archive, Crisis 2025. No one mourned it. By lunch, his parking spot had a new label, reserved for compliance. Elaine didn't ask for an office, just a workstation in the operations bay where she could see the turbines from her chair. The desk looked the same as before. Same coffee mug, same blue pens, same neat stack of documents, but something in the air had changed. People greeted her differently now. Not with pity or fear, but with respect. When she passed, conversations stopped for a heartbeat, not out of awkwardness, but acknowledgement. She didn't gloat. She didn't post. She worked. Quietly, relentlessly, as she always had. But her presence carried weight now. The kind that doesn't need to be loud. The same interns who once whispered, "What does she even do?" now followed her around, taking notes like disciples. She corrected their mistakes gently, showed them the real machinery behind corporate slogans, the invisible scaffolding that held everything up. 2 weeks later, during a quarterly board meeting, the CEO gave her the floor. She spoke for 9 minutes, no slides, no fluff, just a breakdown of how a single unchecked compliance field had cost them millions. She outlined new policies for redundancy audits, documented training standards, and the necessity of cross-departmental accountability. When she finished, the boardroom was silent. The CEO nodded once and said, "Make it happen." She did. Helios became the benchmark facility for grid integration in the Western Corridor, running cleaner and more efficiently than any plant in the company's history. Compliance incidents dropped to 0. Regulatory agencies started using her checklists as templates. It didn't take long for analysts to notice the quiet woman in the gray cardigan who turned corporate failure into a case study in recovery. And when trade magazines asked for interviews, Elaine declined every single one. She wasn't interested in fame. She wanted the system to work. That was her revenge. Not fire, not fury, but function. Bryce, on the other hand, didn't recover. His consulting credentials evaporated after the story reached investors. The quote, "legacy ballast," followed him like a ghost. No company wanted to hire the man who fired the person whose name literally powered a plant. He tried rebranding himself as an organizational strategist on the East Coast. The market disagreed. Elaine heard about it months later from an engineer who'd seen Bryce at a coffee shop job hunting on his laptop. She didn't comment, just sipped her tea and said, "I hope he learned something about redundancy." When December came, the company held its first open house at the Helios facility, a PR event meant to celebrate the plant's success. They invited the entire workforce and their families. Kids in hard hats took selfies beside turbines. The CEO gave a short, polished speech about perseverance and innovation. Then he turned to Elaine and said, "Miss Carter, would you like to say something?" She shook her head. "The system's running. That's enough." But as she walked through the crowd, past the humming panels and polished pipes, a young intern stopped her. "Ms. Carter, can I ask you something?" Elaine smiled slightly. "Sure. Why didn't you just quit when they treated you like that?" She thought for a moment, looking at the turbine lights flickering like constellations across the control hall. "Because the lights don't turn on themselves," she said, and somebody had to remember which switch mattered. Later that night, long after the guests had left and the machines hummed their endless mechanical lullaby, Elaine stood alone at the main console. Her reflection glowed faintly in the glass, older now, but steady. The screen read, "Grid status, stable. Compliance, status, verified." She tapped the brass fob against the console once, a soft metallic sound echoing through the empty floor. A smile ghosted across her face. Small, tired, but real. Then she turned off the overhead lights, one row at a time, leaving the building lit only by the pulse of the turbines, her turbines, alive and humming in the dark. And somewhere deep in the hum of that machinery was the unspoken truth of every quiet professional who had ever been underestimated. They don't make noise when they break. They make history when they return.